Well, it is that time. It is the Sunday Sports Sermon here at New York Sports Wicker Media. I am Wa2K99. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Please also take the time to like, share, and subscribe if you like what you're watching. So, we're going to talk about a couple things. First thing I got to talk about is that Mets doubleheader last night. And going back onto Saturday. My gosh. Now, it's no secret that I spent the better part of 2 decades living in the suburbs of the city of Broad Shoulders of Chicago, Illinois, the Second City, the Windy City, throw out whatever nickname you want, the home of the terrible thin crust pizza. A lot of things you could say, but those Mets Cub games for me always feel a little bit more personal. For being a non-division game, there's something about Mets Cubs where I'd get just a little bit more into it, you know? And this felt like a 9-hour marathon from from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. It was like a death march watching these games. Now the Cubs are a horrible team this year. They're rebuilding. They actually only have one player on their roster now who is on that 2016 team that broke the infamous curse of the Billy Goat, and that's Wilson Contreras, and he might be on his way out within the next couple of weeks before the trade deadline. And you know something? The Cubs just proved how bad they are because they gave the Mets every single chance to win these games, and finally the Mets went out and took them. You know, Pete Alonso, both these games went extra innings. Pete Alonso had the game-winning RBI in both of these games. A sacrifice fly and a hit batsman. Not a base hit, not even a walk. So that was pretty interesting. That first game, though, I got to mention a couple things. First of all, what's the record for a manager getting ejected number of times in a single series? Because David Ross, the Cubs manager, has been ejected from game one, ejected from game two, got this close to being ejected from game three. I'm just hoping he gets ejected from game four. If I have 3 ejections in one series, would be pretty amazing. But that strike zone yesterday from that umpire, Ramon de Jesus, he had a strike zone that was all over the stadium. I mean, he made it. Oh my gosh! Even Angel Hernandez was like, "I don't think you're doing a very good job at that point." But goodness gracious, and you know, of course, we want to see them. You want to see the Mets pound Marcus Stroman. You know, I don't believe Stroman is a very good human being. Uh, I'm sure he won't see this, but if he does, he'll block me, and then I'll just be in good company. But I've never been a big fan. While he can be a very good pitcher, just some of the ways that he's conducted himself and some of the things that he said, he's gotten certain good people in trouble who didn't really deserve it just because they were critical of him. Yeah, I can't say that I'm the biggest Marcus Stroman supporter, although he was a good Met, but the Mets have upgraded from him. So and also the way that he has trashed the Mets organization on the way out, I felt was just very inappropriate and very immature on his behalf. But they did what they had to do in that first game, eventually pulling it out in extra innings. And the highlight was the final play of the game. Dominic Smith had to leave the game due to rolling his ankle. So J.D. Davis went to play first base. And with the tying run on third base, ground ball to third, Eduardo Escobar makes a really good scoop. And then he has to fire the ball with very little time to first base, and J.D. Davis gets that in-between hop. Ball hits the ground, and Davis, who really doesn't play defense, and definitely not first base. If J.D. Davis is in the game, he's probably third base, makes just an unbelievable scoop. For as bad a year as Davis has had, that may go down as the highlight of his season. So, you know, we'll give him we got to give him the credit for that. And going on, Eduardo Escobar. He has now had 12 at-bats against Drew Smyly. 4 of them are home runs. Unbelievable. Now, Escobar has been a disappointment this season. You know, too many strikeouts and whatnot, but he does tend to come through in some of those big moments. I got a feeling before the season is over, Escobar is going to have one real signature moment as a Met. The cycle was a pretty good one. And the home runs in 3 straight days was another. I really think September, October, Escobar, one way or another, is going to really become a memorable name in Mets history. Just got that vibe about him. Outside of that, some of the Cubs' defense is just hideous. Rafael Ortega dropping Starling Marte's fly ball to center. Daniel Norris in extra innings suddenly wheeling around and firing a pickoff throw to second base, which went off the fielder's glove, allowing Francisco Lindor to score a run. It's ridiculous how bad they were, and I got to give a lot of credit to Buck Showalter for sticking with Yohan Lopez for a second inning of relief, because in the first game the Mets used all their high leverage relievers, and they were down to pretty much bare bones, and Showalter chose to stick with Lopez, and he got through it. You got to give him all the credit in the world. He was able to get through it, and Escobar started the game-ending double play. It was incredibly dicey, but the Mets picked up a half a game on Atlanta because the Washington Nationals apparently have no attitude left, and they can't win a game to save their lives. I swear, the Braves have 60 games this season against Washington. How is this possible? Every other week, the Braves got another series against the frickin' Nationals. I mean, I don't even know where this is going. But so that's a few thoughts on that. Now the Mets have one more game. This is the last game of the first half. All-Star break is coming up. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the home run derby. I don't know. It's going to be a very exciting field, no doubt about it. Between Alonso, Schwarber, Acuna, even Pujols, he's probably not going to go very far. But the fact that he's there for his last season, I think it's a nice, good faith gesture. So I think it's going to be really cool. Jose Ramirez. It's a really loaded field. So I thought for this Sunday sports sermon, we do another top 5 list, and today our list is going to be the top 5 games that I have attended in person. So I'm going to go through these 5 through 1, just tell you a little brief story, a little brief synopsis of it. Some of these games you'll probably know. Some of these are going to be a little bit more obscure, but they have some kind of personal meaning for me. So the first game happened in June of 2012. This was at Wrigley Field. It was Mets versus the Cubs. And the Mets trounced the Cubs that day 17-1. Now, why am I picking a regular season game, a random regular season game in 2012? It's because of this. In the games at Wrigley Field I've gone to, the Mets are at the time, were about 4 and about 19. I don't know what it is, but I just had a tendency to go to just about every single loss that the Mets would have in that stadium. I remember my 18th birthday, I went there, and the Mets were down 7-0 in the first inning. This is 1999. This was the Mets team that went to the NLCS, a really good team. Octavio Dotel started, and right there, I think I developed I never got over it. They were down 7-0 in the first inning. Grand slam by Gary Gaetti. The Mets eventually rallied to tie the game, I think like 10-10, still lost 17-10. That was a bad day. So even going all the way back to then, I think that's when the bitterness with the Cubs really started to develop. Plus the year before, the wild card race that the Mets blew, and then they should have been in that wild card race with the Cubs and the Giants. Didn't happen. But yeah, I saw a whole lot of defeats, and that was the day the Mets just whipped up on Jeff Samardzija. John Neese pitched 7 innings. Mets hit 4 home runs, 2 by Daniel Murphy. They had back-to-back 6-run innings that game. So to have a laugher at Wrigley Field, it felt pretty surreal. So, hey, I'm putting that as my number 5. It is what it is. Number 4 is going to be the New York Rangers at the Chicago Blackhawks. January of 2009. This is the Rangers were, on their way up. They hadn't really reached their zenith yet. But you knew that the Blackhawks were a really, really good team by this point. I don't think they haven't won their first Stanley Cup yet, but they were definitely a team on the rise. A little bit better than the Rangers. But this game was so frustrating to watch because the Rangers had to kill 10 of 11 penalties. And the only goal that the Blackhawks scored was on a 5-on-3 by Brent Seabrook. Or one of the two they scored was on a 5-on-3. And it felt inevitable that the refs were just going to give Chicago the game. But the Rangers did get a power play in overtime, and Chris Drury, 11 seconds into that power play, put the game-winning goal home. I remember going outside. It was about 25 degrees that day, and it was still snowing. I did 2 laps running around the United Center, uh, just screaming the Rangers' victory goal song. And ever since then, I have always been a Chris Drury fan. So just that moment of seeing the Rangers win in the United Center, which is an amazing venue for hockey, was pretty sweet. Okay, now we're going to get into some more recognizable games, and obviously going by this list, I've been to a whole lot more losses than I have wins, but such is life. Number 3 is going to be Jets versus Colts, the wild card game in 2010. I talked about that a little bit on the Friday night show with Nick and Jeremy under the Proud New York Jets Fans channel, so you can go back and watch Proud New York Jets Fans if you'd like to hear some more stories about that. I even told my infamous story about what happened to me the year before at the AFC Championship game. And yeah, maybe we'll tell that here another time. But if you watched Nick's show, you got to see their reaction. And to be honest, it's probably better because you get to see the reaction when I shock the living daylights out of Nick and then later Jeremy when I repeated the story. But I will say this. After being in attendance for the AFC Championship game, this was kind of like the revenge tour. And I still remember standing basically behind the end zone, watching Nick Folk's field goal coming towards me. Because when Folk hits the field goal initially, it feels like it's off center a little bit, and then about a third of the way through, it starts to straighten back up and go back through the uprights. And once it started to straighten up, I was looking for penalty flags. What can I say? And that was, yeah, I really let out some frustration. I got it. Usually I'm a good winner, but I don't know. When the games feel a little bit more high stakes for me, yeah, back in those days I could get a little bit crazy. So I was doing the airplane throughout the concourse. Most people were cool, but a few people were ticked off. But the Colts fans were pretty good. They'd seen a lot of success at that time, so they didn't quite have the energy that the Jets fans did. And believe me, there were a few Jets fans in the building that day. But also on that drive, Antonio Cromartie had that huge kickoff return, and then Sanchez had a great pass to Braylon Edwards to make that field goal that much more makeable. Jim Caldwell, the Colts coach, had a few issues with his timeouts, which gave the Jets an opportunity to come back. And and then on to New England it was, and we all know what happened there when they knocked off the big bad Patriots. Number 2 is going to be from this year, New York Rangers at the Carolina Hurricanes. These are all road games. Every one of these is a road game. Man, I got to have a great moment in the Garden or in Citi Field. I've never been to a game at MetLife Stadium. But one of these days, hopefully a home game will be on this list. That'd be pretty nice. But Chris Carter scored those 2 goals. Adam Fox scored just a couple minutes into the game on a power play. It was Memorial Day. The Hurricanes were unbeatable at home. They could not be beaten at home. It had been 7 straight playoff victories in the PNC Arena. Well, the Rangers came out and absolutely whipped up on Carolina in a Game 7. The Rangers fans absolutely took over that arena as well, and off to the Eastern Conference Finals it was. Number 1 is going to be the 2015 National League Championship Series. The New York Mets go into Chicago and sweep the Chicago Cubs. Yep, second time I'm putting the Cubs on this list. That's right. Lucas Duda with an early home run. Travis d'Arnaud with an early home run. Steven Matz was the starting pitcher in that particular game. I was able to get into that game for right about $100 for the NLCS, which is pretty amazing. Of course, the ticket prices had gone down drastically since the Mets went up 3-0. And I started up in the 500s on the first base side of the press box, and by the end I was in that whole congregation of Mets fans behind the Mets dugout. And if you see that, if you remember when the Mets took like the W flag, the white W flag, the Cubs flag when they win, they turned it upside down and wrote ETS next to it, so it looked like Mets. I was right around there. So if you have a wide shot of that, you can spot me. in that whole scene. But I remember hanging out down by the players' entrance, which is like the smallest players' entrance probably in baseball. It was like little league size. I mean, it is not plush around Wrigley. But Tim Tuffle talked to us for a little bit. Travis Darno, I can't tell you what he said, but he was very, very happy, and he gave us some fist pumps. I think ever since then, I became a Darno guy because he was one of the few people who took the time to acknowledge us. There were about 15, 20 of us hanging out by that area. I think because most people just didn't even know where the entrance was. So yeah, I was absolutely walking on air for all the defeats that I'd seen over the 20 years living in Chicago, and it was many of them. It's over 20, 21 losses. I think it is. To see the Mets have that kind of a victory and to see that team go to the World Series. I don't know if I'll ever have an in-person moment that is going to be that good at a sporting event. It was absolutely fantastic. So, all right, that's your Sunday sports sermon. I will see you later, and thank you very much again for tuning in. It means a whole lot to me. Again, please tell a friend about it, and you never know when I might be back on with some more content. And you know where it's going to come from, the wicker chair.